Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for Internship 101. I'm joined by our Senior Interim Associate Director, Christine Cruz-Bagara, who will be answering questions live via chat. So please feel free to bring those questions in. And so as it says, we will be talking about internships today. We know that there's a lot of questions, confusion, maybe a little bit of stress and anxiety around internships and the internship search process. So hopefully we can alleviate a little bit of that today as we talk about why your student might not have an internship. We're going to go over a few questions, not an exhaustive list by any means, but just to give you some ideas about potential reasons why your student might not have an internship. We'll also be looking at, okay, so my student doesn't have an internship, what am I going to do about it? So we'll talk to you about some resources and services and some ideas that your student can utilize if they're having a difficult time finding an internship. And finally, we're going to talk about what can you do if your student doesn't have a job or internship lined up yet. So let's go ahead and get started with that first question, why doesn't my student have an internship? So one of the first reasons might be increased competition. So although the economy is showing some signs of improvement, it's still tough out there. And so your student is no longer just competing with their fellow peers. There's a lot of other people who traditionally may not have pursued an internship as a option who are now looking at that as a viable way to get work experience on their resume. So for instance, many graduate students, some of whom may have gone straight from undergrad to graduate school, and as a result will have very similar experiences to, say, a junior or senior in college, are now competing for paid internships as a way of building up their resume, especially if, as I was saying before, they went straight from undergrad to graduate school. You're also looking at career changers who are looking to paid internships as a really great way to develop some skills that are relevant to their new career field of interest and as an opportunity to apply skills that they've already developed through working. And finally, of course, unemployed. And many of these unemployed may be recent college grads who are still competing with, say, a junior or senior for a paid internship. So it's helpful to know that although the economy is showing signs of improvement, there is still increased competition for internships. Another reason that your student might not have an internship is that they might not know where to look for an internship. So they're hearing from their friends about all these great experiences that they've got, but they don't actually know how to find those opportunities on their own. So a great resource your student can look to is Hire Mason. And Hire Mason is our one-stop shop for jobs, internships, full-time, part-time, on-campus jobs, you name it, it's probably in Hire Mason. And if your student makes an appointment with someone in our office, we can show them how they can set up search agents so they can develop a tailored list of jobs and internships that fit their unique needs. There are also a lot of employers who are in Hire Mason who come to campus to interview George Mason students, so we can show them how they can learn a little bit more about the employer information sessions and know when those are happening so that they can apply for those positions. In addition to Hire Mason, there are meta search agents, so things like Indeed, Simply Hire, Monster, Career Builder, all of those sorts of resources, internships.com. All of these are resources that would also have internship postings. Faculty members. So we send a lot of jobs and internships to faculty members through our listservs, but many times faculty members have their own network of students that they've kept in contact with, and those students might send faculty members information about job openings at the company. So it's a good idea for your student to stay in contact with faculty members, to read any newsletters that come out through the school or their department, because sometimes there are internship postings through those newsletters, and even just walking up and down the hallway, sometimes different schools or departments will post jobs and internships. So that can be another great resource. And finally, networking. We know that 70 to 80% of all jobs are received through networking. So helping your student to discover a little bit more about what networking is and allowing them to start to build those connections. And networking is something that we can help students with as well. We can talk to them about how to use LinkedIn as well as how to use the career network, which we'll be talking about a little bit later in the presentation.
So another common reason why your student might not have an internship is unaware of application deadlines. So in general, the application season, we get a lot of internship postings in Hire Mason around the end of December and kind of through the end of March is where we'll see the bulk of our internships being posted. But for some industries, that timeline is going to be pushed back a little bit. So for instance, if your student was interested in, say, accounting, a lot of the hiring for the accounting industry is going to happen in the fall, Because as we know, our tax preparers, they're very busy in the spring, so they're not going to have the time to be able to recruit students during their busy time. So they would do a lot of their hiring in the fall. Also, if your student might be interested in say, something intelligence related, maybe in the government, and they might require security clearance, that could take 6 months to a year. So again, those application deadlines are going to be pushed back as well to the fall. And this is something we can talk with your student about in an individual appointment and help them to learn a little bit more about their specific industry and when most of the companies in that industry will tend to do their hiring, so that if they need to apply next round, they are better prepared to know when the busy season is for their specific industry of interest. We get a lot of appointments for resumes, and so it's very possible that the reason your student's not receiving the internship that they want is because their resume needs a little bit of work. So it's not uncommon for students to use the same resume to apply for every job. And as this image shows, hiring managers are overwhelmed with resumes. So if your student hasn't taken the opportunity to really tailor their resume to the specific internship that they want to apply to, a hiring manager is going to say, well, they didn't take the time to tailor, I can look over some other applicants. So it's really important that your student take the time to tailor every resume to every position. And we have a lot of resources to help students prepare to do that. So one being resume walk-in hours, and we have resume walk-in hours every day and extended hours on Tuesday. So that's a really great opportunity for your student to bring their resume in, possibly bring in a copy of an internship description that's of interest, so we can help them figure out how to tailor their resume to that job. We also have a resume workshop, and then this workshop is also available online for students who might not have been able to catch it the first time around. We'll go over some helpful tips when it comes to how to write a resume, what to include. The resume workshop also goes over cover letters, and a well-written cover letter can also help you to get that internship. So we can work with your student not just on their resume, but also on their cover letter. And finally, we have a resource called Moving On. It's a guide that has resume samples, cover letter samples, interview questions, all sorts of good things related to the career development process that they can download from our website if they need to see some examples of what a good resume looks like. And there's even a resume checklist in there that the student can use to make sure that they have everything that they need on their resume. So another thing that might come up for your student is that maybe they've found some internships, but what they're realizing is that the internships that they're interested in aren't actually paid. So this will vary industry to industry. So some industries, when you think about something like nonprofit, where there might not be a lot of money to go around in the first place, may not have the funds to be able to pay a student. But that doesn't mean the student is not going to get really great transferable skills and a wonderful experience. Or if a company is very popular, you think about your MTVs or your TV shows that students might want to intern with, those companies know that they're going to get great applicants without necessarily having to pay a student and offering them credit instead. So if your student does come across a great internship and they're realizing it's not paid, again, that's not uncommon. So I just have some examples of maybe some industries that might not always have paid internships. Of course, there's going to be exceptions to every rule. But just for your student to keep in mind that just because the internship isn't paid doesn't mean that it's not a really great opportunity. And now let's say that your student was able to find the internship, they had a great resume, they're getting all the way to the interview process. It's possible that once they get to the interview, that's where they're missing out on the opportunity for the internship. So some employer feedback that we get is that sometimes students are coming to the interviews not prepared, they don't know a lot about the company, they're not really sure about the position at hand. So as much research as a student can do beforehand about the company that they're interested in interviewing with, the better. And we also have resources to help prepare students for interviews. We do mock interviews, and there's also a free resource on our website called Perfect Interview that allows the student to use their webcam to practice answering typical interview questions. And there's a little demo at the end that will talk to them about how they can go about answering those questions. And it's a great way for them to observe themselves, to see how many times they're using verbal fillers, if they're really expanding on their answers. And it's great practice for Skype interviews, since the student would have to practice looking into the webcam as opposed to down at the screen. So if your student is getting to the interview process but not getting the internships, you'd really encourage them to talk with somebody in our office about doing a mock interview so we can really help them to be as successful as possible. So that's some of the reasons why your student might not have an internship. So let's go into, okay, so they don't have one yet, what can they do? The first thing that we would recommend is come and visit us. This is our office. So now this webinar is going to be saved. Your student has no excuse. They see what the building looks like. We're in sub 1. They can make an appointment to meet with us. And we also meet with alumni. It's free for alumni that are 6 months out. So that's a resource that we offer. So some of the services that we have for your student, we can talk with them in an individual appointment about their job or internship search strategy. As I was saying before, we do some mock interviews and resume reviews, and you see our walk-in hours listed there. We also have a variety of workshops, and all of our workshops are online that the students can download. Special events, so in the spring, that can be a really great time to find an internship by going to the job fair, and we have some workshops around job fair prep. And then we have access to employers through Hire Mason where jobs are posted, but oftentimes companies will come to campus for employer information sessions, and that can be a great opportunity for students to network with employers and learn a little bit more about the company to help prepare them for their interview. And finally, we do have on-campus interviewing where employers will actually come to campus and interview students right there, which can be very convenient for students. So again, in an appointment, we can show students how to use all of the resources in Hire Mason, as well as do any of the other things that we have listed here. Another suggestion we have is to expand your horizons beyond the brand name employers. So it's really easy to identify those top companies, but of course that means that those companies are going to be very competitive. So by using a little bit of creativity and being willing to kind of think outside of the box, if your student's able to find a smaller, lesser known organization, that can be a great opportunity to find an internship. So for instance, instead of wanting to do something in PR at MTV, maybe consider being a social media intern for a small nonprofit. Nonprofit organizations are always looking for help, and this would allow the students to get a lot of hands-on experience as opposed to maybe pushing papers, getting coffee. So thinking about being a social media intern at a nonprofit. Instead of working at Google, which we know a lot of students would love to work there, maybe consider being a software developer at a startup company. Again, these organizations are always looking for help, and what the student helps to create, who knows what that could do for their future as well. So we can talk with them about how they might be able to find, identify some smaller startup groups and get an internship that way. A lot of students have an interest in the State Department, the CIA, kind of working abroad and internationally, but maybe consider volunteering at a refugee assistance organization. This would still be a great way to talk about U.S., get people familiar with what's going on here, you're still helping, and this would still allow you to develop a lot of transferable skills. Finally, instead of that accounting internship with one of the big four, maybe doing bookkeeping for a family organization or a small kind of mom and pop. Again, still doing the same skill set, might not be as well known of an organization, but still a great resume builder. So really encourage your students to think beyond those brand name employers. Next, setting up informational interviews. So sometimes students don't really know what an informational interview is, and we just like to explain that to students as finding somebody who's doing a job that's interesting to you, maybe they work at a company that you'd love to work at, and just setting up maybe 20, 30 minutes to talk with that person about what they do, how they were able to get that job, what they think it takes to be successful, what information do you think should be on a resume. So really interviewing somebody who's doing exactly what you want to do to learn more about the field can be a very productive use of a summer and could even lead to internship opportunities in the future. So we have a lot of resources for helping students to identify some informational interview contacts, and one of those resources is the Career Network. In a few months, the Career Network will be changing over to something called ProNet, but what this service does is it's a database of alumni who have said, we're really interested in helping George Mason students succeed. And so the alumni volunteer to do informational interviews with students, and sometimes they even volunteer to allow students to shadow them at their job. So this is a resource we can show students how to access in an appointment. Also LinkedIn. We have a variety of workshops about how to use LinkedIn. We can also talk with a student in an individual appointment about how they could use the LinkedIn, the alumni groups within LinkedIn to really find some good informational interview contacts. And finally, considering the 5 F's of networking. What we mean by that is your friends, family members, fellow peers, so that would be basically alumni, faculty members, and then foundations and professional associations. So a lot of students don't realize that they could join professional associations, and that can be a great tool for networking because oftentimes professional associations have reduced rates for students, and the people who attend those networking events oftentimes might have the ability to hire someone or at least talk to a student about what it takes to be successful. So encouraging students to take advantage of professional associations and foundations. And outside of the 5Fs, I'm sure you all know people in your personal network, neighbors, maybe coworkers, things like that you could start to introduce students to for informational interview contacts. And finally, on our website, we have some information about what an informational interview is, a script to help students figure out how to send out that introduction letter, and then some sample questions to get them started. Attending networking events. Again, we know that networking can be a scary word for students, but since 70 to 80% of jobs are filled through networking, you need to be willing to put yourself out there to really open up some new opportunities. So again, like I was saying before, attending professional association meetings, happy hour events that might be going on in the community, just as an opportunity to reach out to people who are currently in the work world. Career panels. So we sponsor a variety of career panels throughout the year, and you'd be surprised by how many students will leave right after the session's over without talking to the panelists one-on-one. This is a great way to, again, learn more about the field and possibly identify internship openings. And then guest lectures, whether there's a guest lecture that comes to your student's class or whether maybe Mason has a special guest, staying after a little bit to really spend some time to talk with that person can be a great way to network with people that you ordinarily wouldn't have any access to. Pursuing job shadow and externships. So a lot of people aren't really sure what an externship is. An externship is kind of like a condensed version of an internship. So if you think about an internship being maybe the whole summer, an externship might be 1 week, it might be one project that you're working on. It's something that's giving you a taste of what you might be doing in the real world, but not a formalized internship per se. And then job shadowing would just be, coming to work with somebody who's doing something that's of interest to you so that they can show you what the environment's like, maybe introduce you to some people who work there, have some lunch, set up your informational interview. And with job shadowing and externships, it can be a little bit trickier to find these opportunities because most companies aren't going to post job shadow or externships. This is something that your student would want to find through their personal network, also maybe utilizing the career network and LinkedIn as well. But this can be a great way to maybe get 1 or 2 small projects on their resume and at least exposure to the industry. Volunteering and freelance opportunities can be another productive use of the summer. So there's a website called idealist.org, and let me just see my notes here. I think the last time I went on Idealist, there were over 5,000 nonprofit organizations in the DC area. And so on Idealist, students could not only find internship postings, but also just volunteer opportunities and information about organizations around the area. So by volunteering, the student can begin networking, but they can also get hands-on experience. Civic or religious organizations might have service trips, projects, again, things that students can participate in to develop some of those transferable skills for their resume. Job prospecting. So what job prospecting is let's say your student has identified a few companies of interest that they really would like to work for, but there aren't currently any internships posted. Job prospecting would be sending a letter or an email to that employer basically outlining what your student could do for that employer and saying, hey, I'm available to do these types of projects. I know you don't have an internship per se, but I would love to contribute to your organization. And it's creating an opportunity out of, an opportunity that doesn't currently exist. So this is going to be for your more ambitious student who's really willing to put themselves out there. Because again, no guarantee that the employer will, follow back, but it's very possible that they could. So even working with small organizations, small businesses who might not have the resources to post an internship opening, by doing some of this job prospecting, students might be able to create their own opportunities. And then finally, faculty research. So faculty members at George Mason are doing research on all sorts of topics, and most of the time by going onto the departmental webpage of whatever school your student's a part of, you can learn a little bit more about the faculty members and what their research interests are. And if those research interests align with your student, then you can encourage them to reach out to the faculty member to say, hey, is there anything I can do to help? Again, you never know where that might lead. Maybe they, especially if they start early, they might be able to work with the faculty member throughout their time at Mason and maybe even go to a professional conference or something along those lines, but working with their faculty members on research. Taking a certification course or classes. So if your student's not able to find an internship, by really improving their grades, that's going to help their chances for having a better internship in the future. And also taking certification courses. So for instance, if your student's interested in going into nursing, you might try to become a certified nursing assistant. That's going to allow you to get some work experience, but also allow you to get direct contact with patients, and a great thing to have on your resume. For students who are in technical fields, seeing if you can get some of those technical certifications, again, looks great on your resume. And I believe this webinar is going to be available, after today. So here's a link that your students can use to identify certifications that might be relevant to their field of interest and learn a little bit more about what it would take to complete those certifications. And finally, don't overlook the summer or seasonal job. This is still a really great opportunity for your students to get in the workforce and show that they know what it means to show up to a job on time, to work as a member of a team, and to get work done. So for instance, some of the skills your students might develop are multitasking and customer service skills, teamwork, which is something we know that all employers are looking for, like our camp counselor here, some problem solving and even event planning. So helping your students to refocus what their summer experience or kind of summer or seasonal job looks like can still be a great thing to have on their resume. So those were some of our suggestions, and I'm going to get ready to turn it over to Christine so that she can talk to you about what you can do if your student doesn't have an internship.
Hi everyone, how are you all doing? I've been answering your questions on chat, so feel free to keep those coming, and I'll do my best to answer them while we're going through some of these slides. Rachel shared a lot of really great resources with you already, and some of the different things that you can certainly do to help and encourage your student to find some great internship opportunities. So now we're really going to hit home. What are the specific things that you can do to really help them? We talked a lot about networking already, and I want to hit home with this because it's really critical to remember that over 70% of jobs are found through networking. They're never posted. They're not on the meta search engines. They're not necessarily posted on an employer's website because they have an opening or they have an internship opportunity, and they're relying on their trusted network. How many of you probably think about when you want to buy a new pair of shoes or you want to go to a restaurant? What do? You check out Yelp, or you go on review pages and you see what people think. You might post it on your Facebook page, or you might go to your neighbor and say, hey, who's the plumber that you use? Because you're trusting your network. And that's the same thing that employers are doing right now as well. There's so many applicants, and they want to make sure that they're getting the best of the best. And so they're trusting their network. So what you can do is you can really make sure that you can connect your student and encourage them to build these relationships with their various networks. Some of the things that I'm clicking through right here will give you ideas of some different places and different circles that you can really encourage your student to go out there and build these relationships. The biggest misconceptions that your students are going to have about networking is that it's just schmoozing and that it's not really building a relationship, or it's just collecting business cards. They couldn't be more wrong, and so it would be really helpful if you can talk to them about what real networking is all about. For you to be able to explain to them that networking is building a relationship. It's you taking interest in somebody else and them taking an interest in you. One of the things that students are also often nervous about is that they don't have enough experience. Employers understand that. People that have been in the field understand that. I'm sure all of you in the jobs and the different things that you're doing understand that. And so encourage your student to be able to talk about the different things that they are learning in their courses, or the different things that they're learning within their student organizations. And those are some of the conversation pieces that they can have when they're networking, when they're doing informational interviews. Practice the elevator pitch with your student. Some of you may or may not have heard of this before, but it's essentially a brief introduction where your student is able to say who they are, what they're interested in, maybe one or two things about why they might be interested in a particular industry or company that they want to go into, and how some of their skills or experiences may be transferable or may apply in that situation. And then thinking of a really good, thoughtful question or two that they can ask the person. Now, typically when we practice the elevator pitch with students, it does sound a little bit like a pitch, and students usually will go for the first 15 to 30 seconds introducing themselves. Hello, my name is Christine. I'm currently a sophomore at George Mason University. I'm particularly interested in art history, and I had the opportunity to intern at the Corcoran or to volunteer at the Corcoran this past summer, which really built my interest in X, Y, and Z. I'd be really interested in learning more about your art gallery. Okay, something along those lines. What you want to do is you want to practice this with your student, because in reality, it's really going to sound more like a dialogue. Hi, my name's Christine. What's your name? Oh, what do you do? So on and so forth. So you want it to get to a point where they're so ready for this that it comes off naturally and it comes off as a conversation, but they can't do that without the practice. So if you could take some time to work with them on identifying what their interest is, what are some of the relevant experiences they've had, those transferable skills that Rachel just mentioned before, whether that's through lifeguarding, through babysitting, through working at a camp. There are really great elements there that they can pull out. The other piece that you want to keep in mind is a lot of students, when they're working on their elevator pitch, will think that they don't have enough relevant experience. And so again, that's where you really need to hone in on the transferable skills. Employers do not expect students to necessarily have all of the experiences that they're already looking for. Otherwise, the student wouldn't need an internship. Instead, what they want to see is that a student knows how to market their transferable skills. So they can talk about, well, in my marketing classes, I've had the opportunity to work in several group projects. And what I've learned about that is intergroup dynamics and how to communicate effectively with lots of different personality and conversation styles. Something like that would be very useful to your student. So work with your student and practice some of those elements. Also practice with them the handshake and eye contact. This is really critical because this is the first impression that a lot of people are going to have. You don't want the limp noodle, but you also don't want the person that is like the Hulk and has a super, super strong handshake. So make sure that it's firm, but it's not too much. You also want to make sure that you're taking the time to go through all of these things and make sure that it looks fairly natural, so it also doesn't sound too pitchy. And these are some of the different elements that we've already discussed. All right. So like Rachel shared before, this is our building. We're located in Sub 1. We're upstairs in room 3400. Students are welcome to make an appointment with us by coming in, or they can call the number that you see right there on your screen. I would say that appointments typically fill up about a week to 2 weeks in advance, so it's really critical for your students to not waste time. If they're interested in coming in to talking about internships, I highly encourage them to do so soon. They don't want to wait till the last minute. As we've already reiterated multiple times in this webinar, it isn't critical for students to engage in the process, and informational interviewing and networking is part of that. And as we all know, relationship building takes time. So they don't want to wait until the last minute, because networking isn't going to be as effective if they wait until the last second. The last thing I want to share with you is be patient and continue to support and encourage your students. I know you're already doing that, but keep in mind that your students are bombarded with a lot of different things. They're in clubs, they're in classes, they have homework and friends and family, and they've got a lot of different things pulling them in a lot of different directions. And searching for an internship is often like a full-time job. And so be patient with them, continue to encourage them. If you have a student that really likes to plan, maybe work out with them what are some of the mini steps that they could take to start moving forward. Maybe the first thing is just to make an appointment with us or to come into our next workshop. If it's a student that doesn't like as much structure, maybe kind of just brainstorming with them. What are some of the things that would make them excited about the internship search, or helping them get connected and doing some informational interviews with some people that you know would maybe be the right next step in terms of getting them motivated and moving forward in the next step. So those are some of the different things that I would encourage you to do. I do also want to encourage you, if you are an employer and you think you might have an internship opportunity in your company, to also go to our webpage, which is careers.gmu.edu, and sign up for a Hire Mason account for your company. And you can go on and post an internship opportunity so that you could hire a Mason student for your internship. We love it when alums and with parents post positions through Hire Mason, so we highly encourage you to do that as well. That brings us to the end of our webinar. We will certainly take questions. I see some are already coming through, and I know that Rachel is right next to me answering some of those questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin, but it was a pleasure speaking with all of you today.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks for attending. As Christine mentioned, we'll be sticking around if there are additional questions that you have that are individual to you and your student. Rachel and Christine will be here to chat with you and to answer those questions and get those things solidified before we log out of the webinar today. We will be turning off the sound and the video, but we'll be here via chat if you wanted any additional things answered for you. Again, this webinar was brought to you by Orientation Family Programs and Services. This is part of a monthly webinar series. We'll be picking back up in August with a lot more good, timely, and relevant information for you all as family members. And as someone asked earlier, we will be posting both the PowerPoint that you saw today as well as a recording of this webinar to our website, which is masonfamily.gmu.edu. And I'll chat that into our chat box here so you all can have that link. So that'll be available either this afternoon or tomorrow. And Rachel and Christine will be happy to answer any questions you have. So we'll just leave it at that. And thanks to our presenters for a wonderful webinar. Thank you.